Welcome to a story told in the quiet hours, when the world is hushed and the only light comes from a sliver of moon behind slow-moving clouds. A story not of triumphant heroes, but of weary souls, of figures moving through an endless, fog-drenched night, their purpose as obscured as the city they haunt. Tonight, we drift into the dreamscape of Yharnam, a place where the hunt is not an event, but a state of being, and the hunters themselves are the most tragic prey. We will walk alongside the old hunters, those legendary and cursed figures from a time before memory, to understand the nature of the hunt they began, and why it can never truly end. So find a comfortable rest, close your eyes, and let the echoes of their footsteps and the whisper of the mist lull you into a deep and contemplative sleep. Imagine, if you will, a city carved from a mountain of tombstones, its spires piercing a sky that has forgotten the sun, where the air is thick with the scent of old incense, blood, and the damp chill of perpetual evening. This is Yharnam, and its story begins not with a bang, but with a whisper, a secret discovered in the deep, dark places of the earth. Beneath the grand cathedrals and the bustling, paranoid streets, there lay a labyrinth, a tomb of the gods, a place so ancient that the very stone seemed to breathe with a forgotten life. It was here, in the profound and suffocating silence of the underground, that the founders of the healing church found their salvation and their damnation, all contained within a single miraculous substance they would call the old blood. The initial promise was a siren's song of pure, unadulterated hope, a cure for all that ailed the fragile human form, a transcendence of our mortal coil, a step closer to the divine beings they so desperately wished to emulate. It was a promise written in shimmering crimson letters, and the whole of Yharnam drank it down like a fine wine, unaware that the vintage was poisoned with a cosmic truth too terrible to comprehend. In those early, heady days, the hunts were a quiet, almost sacred affair. They were not the city-wide pogroms they would become, but precise, surgical strikes conducted under the cover of a moonless night. The first to take up this grim mantle was a man named Jayaman, a craftsman of unparalleled skill and a warrior with a poet's understanding of motion. He was the first hunter, and he took on disciples, teaching them the delicate, deadly dance of the hunt. They established a workshop, a humble space that smelled of sawdust, oil, and cold steel, where the first trick weapons were forged, marvels of engineering that could transform in the blink of an eye from a compact, manageable tool into a sweeping instrument of immense, visceral power. The tenets were simple, noble even: to be swift, to be merciful, and to contain the emerging threat before the populace ever learned of its existence. They saw themselves as surgeons, cutting out a cancer to save the body of the city. But the cancer was not external. It was in the blood, the very same blood that had promised them eternity. The scourge of the beast did not come from some outside contagion. It was the old blood itself, turning upon its host, unraveling the soul and twisting the flesh into grotesque, furious parodies of humanity. The first time a hunter saw a man, a friend, a fellow citizen, contort and swell, his bones cracking and reforming into a shaggy, monstrous frame, his eyes clouding over with a mindless, feral rage, was the moment the true price of their miracle was revealed. The healing was the disease, and the physicians were themselves already infected. From this nascent, doomed endeavor, the hunter's workshop began to take its true shape, not just as a physical location, but as a philosophy, a lineage of sorrow that would be passed down like a family heirloom. And at the heart of this lineage was Jayaman himself, a figure who became more ghost than man as the years wore on. One can picture him in his workshop, the air hazy with the smoke from his little furnace, his hands calloused and sure, working the mechanisms of a new weapon. He was a genius of violence, a man who could read the flow of a fight like a composer reads a symphony, anticipating every movement, every feint, every desperate lunge. But his skill came at a cost, a bargain struck in a moment of desperation with a being from a realm beyond human understanding, the moon presence. This slender, pale entity, a creature of the cosmos that craved a surrogate, found in Jayaman a willing, if not entirely understanding, partner. Together, they forged the hunter's dream, a pocket of reality stitched from memory, longing, and pale moonlight. It was to be a sanctuary, a place where hunters could return from death, their purpose renewed, their bodies whole. But for Jayaman, it became a gilded cage. He is forever trapped there, slumped in a wheelchair amidst the overgrown, perpetual twilight of the dream, haunted by the memory of a woman he could not save, mumbling in his sleep for someone named Lawrence to free him from this terrible, silent vigil. The dream, for all its power, is his personal hell, a refuge that became a prison, and he is its eternal, sorrowful warden. His story is inextricably woven with that of Lady Maria, his most gifted and beloved student. She was a descendant of the ancient Pithumerians, the very people who had first guarded the labyrinth and its secrets, and their noble blood ran thick with a preternatural grace. Her chosen weapon was the rakuyo, a blade of such elegant, fluid lethality that it seemed less a tool of war and more an extension of her own will. She was the warden of the astral clock tower, a place that stood as a gateway between the waking world and the cosmic truths that lay beyond, and she served with a fierce, unyielding pride. But that pride was shattered on the jagged rocks of a single horrific event, an event that would stain the very soul of the hunt forever. The details are murky, lost to the fog of trauma and shame, but it is known that she was part of a delegation, a group of the church's most capable hunters, who journeyed to a remote, forlorn place, the Fishing Hamlet. What they did there, what she witnessed or perhaps participated in, broke something fundamental within her. The precise nature of her shame is a ghost that clings to the astral clock tower. But it was profound enough that she abandoned her beloved rakuyo, casting it down a dark well as if discarding a part of her own soul. And she retreated from the world, eventually taking her own life in a quiet, desperate act of atonement. The bond between her and Jayaman was one of deep, unspoken understanding, a shared burden of failure and loss that would come to define the very essence of what it meant to be a hunter, to be a protector who brings ruin, a healer who spreads a plague. And so, armed with the tools and techniques born from this crucible of tragedy, the hunters faced the inevitable consequence of the church's ambition: the full, terrifying bloom of the Ashen Blood Plague. It began in Old Yharnam, a district that was once the thriving, industrial heart of the city, its forges and workshops fueling Yharnam's prosperity. The sickness was a subtle, insidious thing at first, a creeping malaise that left its victims weak and listless, their skin taking on a pale, ashen hue. But it was merely the prelude, the kindling before the inferno. The ashen blood acted as a catalyst, accelerating the beastly scourge hidden within the old blood, transforming the afflicted not slowly, but in violent, wrenching convulsions. The grand, cobbled streets of Old Yharnam became a charnel house, a cacophony of snarls and screams, the air thick with the coppery tang of blood and the acrid smoke of burning homes. The district descended into a festering, burning ruin, a vision of hell made manifest on earth. Faced with this uncontrollable outbreak, the healing church made a fateful, final decision. Under the direction of men like Archibald, a scientist obsessed with the latent power of the bolt, and his faction of brutal pragmatists known as the Powder Kegs, hunters who believed that if a weapon isn't firing, it's not yet a weapon. The order was given. They sealed the great gates of Old Yharnam, trapping the infected, the dying, and those few still human souls who had not yet succumbed inside. Then they set the sky on fire. A rain of incendiary devices fell upon the district, a holy fire meant to purge the sin of the beast, and it burned for days, reducing the once great city to a smoldering tomb of blackened timber and melted stone. Among the hunters who participated in this atrocity was a man named Jura. He was a pragmatic man, a powder keg through and through, who saw the burning as a grim but necessary duty. But something happened to Jura in the aftermath. Perhaps he returned to the scorched, silent ruins on a quiet day and saw, amidst the ash and bones, the remnants of the lives that had been lost. He saw the beasts not as monsters, but as people, his people, victims of a curse they never asked for. In a moment of profound and terrible clarity, he awoke to the humanity of the beasts, and his entire world inverted. He forsook his former allies, his former life, and took up an eternal vigil atop the highest tower in the charred remains, his Gatling gun a deterrent to any hunter who would dare disturb the peace of the dead. He became a monument to the hunt's ultimate futility, a guardian of a grave he helped to dig, his presence a silent, damning sermon on the price of fear and the nature of the monsters we create. This descent into utter damnation, this point of no return for the hunters and the church, can be traced back to a single defining act of cosmic transgression, an event that took place not in the city, but on a distant, rain-lashed shore. The Fishing Hamlet. To even speak of it is to feel the chill of the sea wind and the sting of the constant, dreary rain. It was a place of simple folk who lived their lives by the rhythm of the tides, their world defined by the vast, unknowable ocean. And from that ocean, something had washed ashore, or perhaps had chosen to reside there, the great one known as Kos. A being of immense, benevolent power, a true child of the cosmos, who may have even blessed the hamlet and its people with her presence. The healing church, in its ravenous hunger for ascension, learned of this and mounted an expedition. What happened next is the source of the curse that binds the old hunters to their endless nightmare. They found Kos either dead or dying, and they did not revere her. They defiled her. Their scholars, their hunters, they laid hands upon the divine corpse, probing, cutting, seeking the secrets within. And from her, or from her often child, they retrieved the ultimate prize, the source of true enlightenment. A cord of the eye, a physical tether to the world of the great ones. This act of violation was so profound, so fundamentally blasphemous, that it cried out to the cosmos for vengeance. The sin was not just a moral failure. It became a physical, tangible force, a curse that seeped into the very being of every hunter tied to Jayaman and his workshop. You can see the manifestation of this sin in the hamlet itself. The once simple fishermen were transformed into monstrous, writhing things, their bodies bloated and fused with the shells of crustaceans, their minds lost to a fish-eyed madness. The very landscape became diseased, with strange, pulsating growths of lumenwood, a parasitic, phosphorescent flora sprouting from the thatched roofs, and even from the bodies of the inhabitants. Their soft, ghostly light a mockery of the insight the church so desperately sought. The air is filled with the sound of their wet, gurgling breaths, and the mournful ringing of a lone bell buoy out in the misty bay, a perpetual funeral dirge for the god they murdered and the innocents they slaughtered. This is the bedrock of the hunter's damnation, the original sin for which there can be no forgiveness, only an endless, cyclical atonement in the nightmare that was born from that sorrowful, salty shore. The weight of that sin is a physical pressure, a phantom ocean current that pulls at the very fabric of the hunter's shared consciousness, a gravity of guilt that bends the light in their dreams. It is a stain that cannot be washed clean, for it was written not in ink, but in the very substance of their being, in the blood that now coursed through their veins and the echoes that resonated in their minds. And so, the hunters who partook in that transgression, or who were bound by the lineage of Jayaman's contract, found themselves pulled not into the gentle release of true death, but into a darker, more resonant afterlife. They were drawn into the hunter's nightmare, a realm sculpted from the collective anguish of their crimes, a purgatory built by a wrathful, grieving cosmos as a perfect, ironic punishment. It is not a place one simply travels to. It is a state of being one sinks into, a tar-like mire of memory and regret that clings to the soul. The entrance to this nightmare is itself a profound statement of their damnation. It is not a grand, Gothic archway or a hidden, mystical portal. It is a simple, pathetic, and utterly horrifying pile of corpses, a writhing, twitching mountain of failed hunters and blood-drunk beasts, all fused together in a grotesque sculpture of perpetual agony. This is the amygdala's grasp, the means of transit, and to be taken by it is to feel the cold, chitinous fingers of a lesser god close around your body, not with malice, but with a dreadful, impersonal inevitability, like a tide pulling a grain of sand out to sea. The journey is a visceral lurch through dimensions, a sensation of being turned inside out. Your mind flayed open to the howling static of the cosmos before being violently reassembled in a place that should not be. And the first thing that greets you is the smell. It is the hunter's nightmare in its most fundamental olfactory form. The cloying, sweet-rot stench of old blood, so thick in the air it coats the back of your throat, mingled with the damp, fungal odor of decay and the sharp, metallic tang of lightning that has just torn the sky asunder. This is a Yharnam that is both terrifyingly familiar and profoundly wrong. The architecture is the same leaning, timber frame houses, the same cobbled streets slick with a perpetual crimson dampness. But it is all twisted, warped by a pervasive, internal bleeding of reality. The stone weep seems to ooze a dark, viscous fluid. The very bricks of the buildings look soft, almost pulsing, as if the city itself is a living, suffering organism. The sky is a maelstrom of bruised purples and violent reds, a perpetual, silent scream of color, with no sun, no moon, only a sickly, internal luminescence that casts long, distorted shadows that seem to move of their own volition. Here, in this realm of eternal hunt, the hunters themselves are the most pitiable specters. They are not the swift, surgical figures of Jayaman's early teachings, but shambling, broken things, consumed by the very bloodlust they were meant to quell. You see them stumbling through the fog-choked streets, their forms bloated and distorted, their hunter garbs stained beyond recognition, their weapons now crude, heavy implements of butchery rather than tools of a sacred duty. They mutter to themselves, fragments of prayers to a god that has abandoned them, or snarl with a mindless hunger, their eyes glowing with a faint, mad orange light. They are trapped in a single, endless moment of their blood drunkenness, forever reenacting the worst excesses of the hunt, their violence a pointless, cyclical performance for an audience of none. They are the embodiment of the philosophy's corruption, the final, logical conclusion of a war against a monster that was, all along, staring back from within their own hearts. And at the heart of this corrupted city, standing as a monument to the dream that became a prison, is the nightmare's version of the workshop. It is a burned-out, derelict shell of the original, a place of blackened timber and collapsed beams, open to the churning, angry sky. The scent of sawdust and oil is long gone, replaced by the acrid smell of ancient smoke and the iron-rich odor of a slaughterhouse. Here, the echoes of Jayaman's failure are almost deafening. You can feel his longing, his despair, seeping from the warped floorboards, a psychic residue so potent it feels like a physical chill. This is where the dream and the nightmare touch, two sides of the same cursed coin, and the boundary between them is as thin as a sorrowful sigh. But the nightmare does not end with this twisted reflection of Yharnam. It deepens, it spirals downward, following the trail of blood and sin to its most concentrated point. The path leads to a place that defies the very geometry of the waking world, the research hall. This was the healing church's most secret and sacrilegious laboratory, a place where the line between science and atrocity was not merely crossed, but utterly erased. In the nightmare, it manifests as a towering, cylindrical abomination, a dizzying spiral of iron walkways and bubbling, chemical vats that stretches up into a dizzying, impossible height. The air here is a toxic cocktail of formaldehyde, ether, and the sweet, sickly scent of Lysol. A desperate attempt to mask the underlying stench of opened bodies and failed experiments. The inhabitants of this hall are the church's most tragic and damning evidence. They are the patients, men and women who came seeking the church's healing, only to be transformed into living test subjects in the pursuit of enlightenment. Their bodies are horrifically distorted, swollen into giant, bloated heads or stretched into writhing, multi-limbed creatures. Their minds addled by chemicals and cosmic insight, until they are little more than whimpering, pleading things. They shuffle along the walkways, their distorted forms casting long, dancing shadows in the hall's eerie greenish light. Their voices a chorus of confused misery, calling out for help, for mercy, for the menses cage that promised them eyes but only delivered madness. They are the physical proof of the church's central, horrific lie, that the path to godhood was paved with the shattered lives of the very people they had sworn to save. Their endless, suffering existence in the nightmare is a perfect, cruel justice, an eternal testament to the price of ambition, unchecked by empathy. And presiding over this cathedral of suffering, in life and in this nightmare, was the one who perhaps understood the depth of their failure more than any other. Lady Maria. Her presence here is not that of a shambling, blood-drunk spectre, but of a warden who has fully embraced her punishment. She is found not in the astral clock tower of the waking world, but in its nightmare counterpart, a place that feels even more ancient and solemn. The air within thick with the smell of old brass, ozone, and a profound, unshakable melancholy. She is no longer the proud warrior who cast her blade away. Here, she has reclaimed it, or perhaps a nightmare echo of it, and she guards the way forward with a weary, relentless determination. When she rises from her chair, it is not with the fury of a beast, but with the deep, soul-crushing resignation of one who knows there is no escape, only the endless performance of one's duty. Her fight is a ballet of regret, each fluid, deadly motion a recitation of her shame. The Rakuyo's blades weeping blood that is as cold as the depths of the ocean from which the curse originated. To face her is not to face a monster, but to confront the very concept of a noble spirit, broken by its own complicity in an unforgivable sin. Her continued existence in the nightmare is her chosen penance, a self-imposed sentence to forever guard the horrifying truth that lies at the bottom of this spiral of despair, a truth she helped to create and could never forgive. The silence in the clock tower after her fall is heavier than any sound, a palpable void that seems to drink the very light from the air. The scent of her spectral blood, like cold brass and forgotten salt, hangs in a fine mist, a final exhalation of a guilt that could never be absolved. To step past her still form is to cross a final, sacred threshold, to move from the realm of personal damnation into the epicenter of the original sin itself. The grand, ornate mechanism of the clock tower gives way to a crude, rocky passage, and the air shifts abruptly. The cloying sweetness of old blood is scoured away, replaced by a bracing, violent gust that carries the true, unadulterated essence of the nightmare, the smell of the open sea. But it is not the clean, salty air of a healthy ocean. This is a stench of brine and rot, of fish left to bloat in the sun, of churning depths where light has never reached. It is the smell of a wound that has festered for eons, a planetary gangrene. And then the sound arrives. It is a low, constant, droning roar, the sound of countless waves crashing against jagged cliffs, a white noise of perpetual violence. Underneath it, like a dissonant choir, is the cacophony of the hamlet's transformed inhabitants. Their wet, gurgling breaths, the scrape of their barnacle-encrusted limbs against the wet stone, their half-formed, ululating cries that are neither fully human nor fully bestial, but something infinitely more sorrowful. The rain here is not a cleansing shower, but a ceaseless, dreary downpour, a weeping sky that has forgotten how to stop. Each drop feels heavy, laden with the memory of the atrocity, and they collect in cold, shallow pools that reflect the bruised, tumultuous sky with a sickly sheen. The Fishing Hamlet is a landscape of profound and intimate violation. The small wooden huts, which once would have housed generations of simple fishing families, are now sagging, ruined things, their thatched roofs burst open from the inside by the grotesque, pulsating growths of lumenwood. These parasitic plants glow with a faint, internal bioluminescence, a pale, ghostly light that casts long, dancing shadows and gives the entire scene the feeling of a fever dream. Their smooth, wood-like surfaces are warm to the touch, and they seem to pulse with a slow, rhythmic beat, as if the very earth here has a diseased heart. The ground is a treacherous mix of slick, black rock and deep, sucking mud that clings to your boots with a desperate, hungry grip, as if the hamlet itself does not want you to leave, demanding you stay and share in its suffering. The villagers themselves are the most heartbreaking testament to the curse's power. They are not simply monsters. They are people frozen in a single, agonizing moment of transformation. You can still see the echoes of their humanity in the way one clutches a rusted fishing gaff, not as a weapon, but as a treasured tool from a life long lost. In the way another sits slumped against a hut, its head, now a massive, bulbous thing covered in unblinking fish eyes, cradled in its claws, rocking back and forth as if in mourning. Their bodies are horrifying amalgamations of man and sea creature, limbs distended and twisted, skin stretched taut over bloated forms, and covered in sharp, crustaceous shells that click and scrape as they move. They are not aggressive out of inherent malice, but from a place of deep, instinctual trauma, lashing out at the hunter, the symbol of the church, the bringer of their ruin with the blind, pathetic fury of a tortured animal. To walk among them is to be a ghost at a funeral you caused, to witness a pain so vast and ancient it has become a geological feature of this nightmare. And at the center of it all, cradled in a shallow, tidal cave, lies the sauce. The massive, beautiful, and utterly tragic form of Kos, or some phantom of her, as the nightmare has preserved her. Her body, pale and immense, is washed by the ceaseless tide, her long, graceful limbs trailing in the water like the roots of a world tree. Even in death, or in this dream state of death, there is a divine grace to her, a serenity that makes the violation committed upon her all the more horrifying. The signs of the church's work are there, subtle and unspeakable. The unnatural angles of her limbs suggest a rough, ignorant handling. The air around her hums with a profound, cosmic grief, a mother's sorrow for a child violently taken. This is the altar upon which the hunter's covenant was damned, the sacred ground defiled, and the weight of it presses down, a physical force that makes every breath a labor. It is from this sacred, desecrated space that the final, and perhaps most poignant, specter emerges. Not a beast, not a hunter, but a child, the orphan of Kos. Its birth was an act of violence, its life begun in the cold air of a murder scene. It appears as a small, pale, wretched thing, dragging the massive, ghostly placenta of its mother behind it like a burial shroud. Its cries the raw, piercing wails of a newborn that has known nothing but pain. Its fight is not one of skill or strategy, but of pure, unadulterated anguish. It does not wield a weapon. It is the weapon, a living embodiment of the curse, lashing out with bolts of concentrated hatred and grief that crack the very air like thunder. The arena becomes a tempest, the rain driving horizontally, the sea frothing and churning as if in sympathetic agony. To fight it is to participate in the original trauma, to become the church hunter, the violator, all over again. It is a profoundly unsettling experience, a battle that feels less like a contest of strength and more like a desecration of a grave. And when it falls, when its final, shuddering cry is torn from its body and swallowed by the wind, the release is not one of victory, but of summa finality. The storm does not cease, but it lessens. The rain continues to fall, but the violent, vengeful energy that charged it seems to dissipate, leaving only a cold, weary drizzle. The orphan's body fades, and in its place, for a fleeting moment, one might see a phantom, the spirit of Kos herself, reaching out a pale, graceful hand as if to finally comfort her tormented child, before both mother and offspring dissolve into the mist. It is a moment of quiet, heart-breaking grace in the heart of the storm, a suggestion that even here, in this pit of damnation, there can be a form of peace, not through vengeance, but through the end of suffering. This quiet moment, however, is not an end. It is a release of a specific, concentrated agony, but the machinery of the nightmare is vast and self-perpetuating. The curse that bound the old hunters was woven from the threads of their own actions, a psychic resonance that cannot be so easily severed. The silence that follows the orphan's passing is not the silence of absolution, but the quiet of a held breath. The hunter's nightmare is a self-sustaining engine of penance, and the echoes of the hunt are too deeply etched into its fabric to simply vanish. The blood-drunken hunters in the streets below will continue their mindless patrols. The patients in the research hall will continue their plaintive cries, and the weight of the sin will still hang in the air, a fog that cannot be dispelled. The hamlet, though perhaps quieter, remains a grave, and the sea continues its eternal, mournful dirge against the shore. The hunt, on some level, must continue, for the nightmare is not a place one leaves. It is a state of being one carries, a shadow that falls long behind every hunter who has ever raised a weapon in the name of a flawed and bloody grace. The cycle is the point, the endless, recursive punishment for a crime against the cosmos itself, and its gears, though momentarily stilled, are forever poised to turn once more. The gentle lap of wavelets against the slime-slicked rocks now seems to hold a new, hollow tone, as if the sea itself is exhausted, its great, vengeful heart finally beating a slower, wearier rhythm. The luminescent lumenwood growths continue their slow, rhythmic pulsation, but the light seems dimmer, as if feeding on a diminished sauce of anguish. This is the aftermath, not of a battle won, but of a fever breaking. The fundamental nature of the nightmare has not changed. The stone still weeps its dark ichor. The sky still churns with its silent, colorful scream. But the core tension, the screaming nerve at the center of it all, has been soothed. A profound, cosmic lassitude has settled over the hamlet, a sedation of the primary wound. One can stand on the precipice, looking out over the churning, lead-gray ocean, and feel the sheer, vertical depth of the despair that built this place. It is a despair that stretches down, past the foundations of the world, into the cold, lightless abyss of moral failure. The hunters, in their arrogance, did not merely kill a god. They interrupted a sacred process, a cycle of life and death that belonged to an order of existence far beyond their comprehension. They saw a miracle and called it a resource. They witnessed a divinity and saw only a specimen. This is the root of the curse, the reason it is so inescapable. It is a punishment for a failure of perception, for a profound and catastrophic lack of understanding. The healing church sought eyes to line their brains to see the truth of the cosmos, but they were blind to the most fundamental truth of all, that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, but revered. That some doors once opened can never be closed again. And so, the hunters are condemned to this recursive existence, this endless restaging of their original sin. They are actors in a play where the script is written in their own blood, and the director is their own collective, unassuageable guilt. The blood-drunken hunter, stumbling through the streets of the nightmare Yharnam, is not merely a monster. He is a living confession. Every snarl is an admission of his complicity. Every swing of his corrupted weapon is a reenactment of the violence in the hamlet. He is trapped in the moment of his greatest moral failure, forced to relive it for eternity, a fly in the amber of his own transgression. There is a terrible, poetic symmetry to it. They sought to transcend their humanity by harnessing the power of the gods, and their punishment was to become less than human, to be reduced to the basest, most bestial expression of their own flawed nature. This is the true horror of the hunter's nightmare. It is not the monsters, the gore, or the pervasive sense of dread. It is the exquisite, personalized nature of the torture. It is a prison built from the very bricks of the prisoner's own sins. Each hunter here is confronted with a perfect, funhouse mirror reflection of their own personal damnation. For the anonymous, blood-drunk hunter, it is the mindless violence. For the patients of the research hall, it is the physical and mental distortion they suffered in the name of progress. For Lady Maria, it is the elegant, deadly dance of her shame, a waltz she can never leave. The nightmare is a master psychologist, tailoring a unique hell for every soul it ensnares, all of them variations on the same theme. The price of reaching for a knowledge that was never meant to be held in human hands. And what of the waking world? What of the Yharnam that still exists, shrouded in its own mist and misery, continuing the hunt under the pale light of a different moon? The nightmare exists as a subterranean current beneath its streets, a psychic abscess that leaks its poison into the collective unconscious of every hunter who picks up the saw cleaver or the threaded cane. The hunts continue, each one a faint, distorted echo of the original sin in the Fishing Hamlet. The beasts are still slain, the blood is still ministered, and the populace remains blissfully, tragically ignorant of the foundational crime upon which their city, their faith, and their very hope for healing is built. They fight the symptoms while the disease, the original spiritual cancer, festers in a dimension just adjacent to their own, a ghost in the machine of their reality. The connection is Jayaman, the first hunter, the architect of the dream that became a gateway to this hell. As he slumps in his wheelchair in the hunter's dream, trapped in his own private torment of loss and regret for Lady Maria and his lost friend Lawrence, he serves as the linchpin. His dream is the antechamber, the waiting room for both the hope of the hunt and the damnation of the nightmare. Every hunter who awakens in that sun-dappled, peaceful dream is, on some level, tethered to the howling, blood-soaked reality that lies just beneath it. They are all children of Jayaman's contract, and they all inherit the spiritual debt he incurred. When a hunter in the waking world succumbs to blood drunkenness, when the line between man and beast blurs in their mind, it is not merely a physiological reaction. It is a psychic pull, a siren song from the nightmare, inviting them home to the purgatory they have, through their actions and their lineage, always belonged to. This is the unspeakable truth that the church buried beneath its grand cathedrals and its complex liturgies. The hunt is not a holy war against an external evil. It is a desperate, futile attempt to outrun a shadow, a ghost that lives in their own veins. Every time a hunter plunges their weapon into the flesh of a beast, they are, in a metaphysical sense, reenacting the violation of Kos. They are repeating the original act of taking something sacred and profaning it, of turning life into a resource, a thing to be dissected and consumed. The beastly scourge is not a separate entity. It is the old blood's memory of that violation, a cellular-level trauma expressing itself in a frenzy of flesh and fury. The hunters are not curing a plague. They are fighting the manifestation of their own foundational sin. It is a war that can never be won because you cannot defeat an enemy that is, fundamentally, yourself. The faint, almost imperceptible shift in the nightmare's atmosphere after the orphan's release is therefore not a cleansing, but a transference. The concentrated, singular agony of the mother and child has been resolved, but the energy of that agony, the cosmic wrongness of the act, is too vast to simply disappear. It dissipates, seeping back into the fabric of the nightmare, feeding the lesser sorrows, empowering the more generalized despair. The blood-drunken hunters may seem a fraction slower, their snarls a touch less fervent. The patient's cries may sound a little more distant, a little more hollow, but they are all still there. The engine of penance continues to run, its fuel now a more diffuse, ambient misery. The hunt, in its essence, remains eternal. For the lone hunter who witnessed the release of the orphan, who stood in the presence of Kos's fading phantom, the world is now irrevocably altered. The simple, binary logic of the hunt, hunter versus beast, man versus monster, has been shattered. They have walked through the gallery of their predecessors' damnation and seen their own reflection in every tortured exhibit. They have learned that the weapons they wield are not just tools, but relics of a tragedy. That the blood that fortifies them is the very substance of the curse. That every step they take on the cobblestones of Yharnam is a step upon the grave of a god, and every beast they slay is a kinsman, a fellow victim of a promise that was a lie from its very first crimson whisper. To continue the hunt with this knowledge is to bear a weight that would crush an ordinary soul. It is to move through a world that is now seen as a thin veneer over a bottomless ocean of sorrow. To hear the eternal, mournful ringing of the hamlet's bell buoy in the silence between the heartbeats of the night. The hunt continues, but the hunter is now a ghost in their own life, carrying the silence of the nightmare within them, a quiet, cold companion on the endless, fog-drenched streets. The silence that the hunter carries is not an empty one. It is a vessel filled to the brim with the echoes of all that has been witnessed. The wet gurgle of the hamlet's inhabitants, the soft, despairing click of Lady Maria's heels on the clock tower floor, the final, shuddering sigh of the orphan. This silence is a heavier burden than any trick weapon, a weight that settles in the marrow of the bones and tints the very light of the world with a sepia tone of regret. Stepping back from the precipice of the hamlet, the journey retraces itself, but the path is no longer the same. The hunter walks not through a foreign landscape of horror, but through a memory of their own making, a gallery of follies in which they now recognize their own face. The climb back through the astral clock tower is a somber procession through a temple now devoid of its priestess. The grand, interlocking gears of the clock, which once seemed to measure out a damned eternity, now appear stilled, or perhaps they were always still, their motion an illusion for those trapped within the nightmare's narrative. The air, once thick with Maria's sorrow, now holds only the ghost of it, a fragrance of cold steel and dried tears. Her chair sits empty, a throne of abdication. To pass through this space is to understand that some guardians are not defeated, but relieved, their eternal watch ended not by violence, but by a shared acknowledgement of a debt, if not paid, then at least acknowledged. Descending once more into the research hall, the cacophony of the patients seems different. Their distorted, bulbous heads still loll on feeble necks. Their multi-jointed limbs still twitch and scramble across the iron grates. But their pleas, are my eyes yet to open? Plip, plop, plip, plop, now sound less like the mad ramblings of broken minds and more like a liturgical chant, a hymn to the folly of seeking elevation through mutilation. The greenish, chemical glow of the hall's glass vessels casts long, dancing shadows that now seem less menacing and more like the guttering flames of a forgotten vigil. These are not monsters to be put out of their misery, but monuments. Each one is a standing stone in a field of transgression, their very existence a question posed to the heavens. What is the cost of a dream? The hunter moves through them not as a warrior, but as a penitent on a pilgrimage, the scent of Lysol and ruptured viscera, a sacred incense in this cathedral of failed ambition. Emerging back into the nightmare's version of Yharnam, the city feels tired. The blood-drunken hunters still shamble through the streets, their weapons scraping against the weeping cobblestones, but their movements are lethargic, their snarls diluted, as if the vital energy of their rage has been siphoned away. The fiery, chaotic sky continues its silent, swirling scream, but the colors seem muted, the violent reds bleeding into weary mauves and the furious purples softening into a bruised lavender. It is as if the nightmare, having expended its core, its beating heart of vengeance upon the hunter, now has little energy left for the maintenance of its peripheral torments. The hunt here continues, but it is a hollow ritual, a play performed by actors who have forgotten their lines and are merely going through the motions, night after endless night. The path eventually leads back to the starting point, to the writhing, twitching pile of corpses that serves as the nightmare's gate. The amygdala's cold, chitinous limb awaits, its offer of return as impersonal as its initial act of capture. The transition back is no less violent, a nauseating inversion of space and self, a feeling of being wrung out like a rag soaked in the effluvia of another dimension. But when the hunter reassembles, when the senses stop reeling and the world solidifies once more, it is not into the gentle twilight of the hunter's dream. It is into the waking world of Yharnam, the so-called real city, under its own different pale moon. And yet, it is not the same city. It can never be the same. The hunter stands on a familiar street, perhaps in the cathedral ward, where the grand Gothic spires claw at a sky smudged with ordinary clouds. The air carries the usual scents: damp stone, faint incense from the grand cathedral, the ever-present metallic hint of old blood. The distant, rhythmic tolling of a church bell is a sound of order, of ritual, of a world that believes it understands its own suffering. But to the hunter who has returned from the shore of the original sin, these sensations are now a palimpsest. They see the clean, cobbled streets, but superimposed over them is the memory of the nightmare's bleeding bricks. They hear the solemn bell, but underneath it, like a persistent tinnitus, is the mournful clang of the hamlet's bell-boy. They smell the incense, but it is forever married now to the stench of lumen wood and rotting sea life. This is the true legacy of the old hunters, the inheritance that every hunter who follows in their footsteps unknowingly accepts. It is a double vision, a perception of the world in two simultaneous, overlapping layers: the tangible reality of the present and the psychic scar tissue of the past. The beasts that lunge from the shadows are no longer just beasts. They are echoes of the fishermen, of the patience, of the blood-drunk hunters themselves, all of them victims of the same primordial mistake. The act of the hunt, once a simple, brutal necessity for survival, is now a complex ritual heavy with metaphysical significance. Every parry, every visceral attack, every spray of crimson is a restaging, a tiny, recursive performance of the violation in the Fishing Hamlet. The hunter is no longer a mere participant in the night's events. They are a living conduit for the entire, tragic history of their calling. This awareness changes the very physics of the hunt. The weight of the saw cleaver in hand is not just the weight of steel and mechanism. It is the weight of Jayaman's grief, of the countless hunts that have come before. The restorative blood vials no longer taste merely of vitality and iron. They carry the faint, saccharine aftertaste of the old blood's false promise, a hint of the cosmic poison that started it all. The doll in the dream, when her soothing hands grant strength, does so not just with the power of the moon presence, but with the accumulated sorrow of a lineage that stretches back to a single, rainy shore. To move through the waking world with this knowledge is to be a ghost among the living, to see the strings that pull the puppets of Yharnam's society, to hear the silent, screaming subtext beneath every prayer offered to the healing church. The city, in its ignorance, continues its desperate ballet. The townsfolk still bar their doors, their voices trembling with a fear they do not comprehend. The church doctors still minister their blood, their eyes alight with a fervent belief in a salvation that is, in truth, a slower, more insidious damnation. The other hunters, those not yet touched by the deeper echoes, continue their work with a grim, professional detachment, unaware that they are dancing on the edge of an abyss that has already swallowed their predecessors. They are like children playing with fire in a room filled with gunpowder, blissfully ignorant of the conflagration that awaits a single, misplaced spark. And the hunter who knows, who has walked through the nightmare and returned, must now decide what to do with this terrible clarity. To continue the hunt is to participate in the very cycle they now understand to be a damnable, futile repetition. But to stop is to allow the beastly scourge to consume the last vestiges of the city, to let the physical manifestation of the curse run its course unchecked. There is no clean path, no righteous choice, only a series of flawed actions taken in a world built upon a foundational flaw. This is the ultimate curse of the old hunters, passed down through the blood and the dream, the curse of insight. It is the realization that there are no heroes in this story, only victims and executioners, and very often they are the same person. The hunt is eternal not because the beasts are endless, but because the sin is. It is a self-perpetuating machine, and every hunter from the first to the last is merely another cog in its grinding, sorrowful, and inexorable mechanism. The night in Yharnam is always long, and the fog, it seems, has only just begun to lift, revealing a landscape of despair far vaster and more permanent than anyone could have ever feared. The decision itself becomes a form of paralysis. To raise the saw cleaver now feels like lifting a mountain of guilt, each ounce of pressure on the trigger mechanism a conscious choice to re-engage with the machinery of damnation. The beast, a shambling, snarling mass of fur and fused flesh, charges with a mindless aggression, its claws scraping against the cobblestones with a sound that is both foreign and intimately familiar. The same sound 1,000 other claws have made in 1,000 other iterations of this same moment. Its eyes, glowing with that feral, orange ember of the scourge, hold no malice, only a profound, trapped confusion. It was a person once. It drank the same blood, believed the same lies, and now it is this, a thing of instinct and pain. To kill it is a mercy, the hunters of old would say. But is it? Or is it merely the continuation of the violence, the final, ugly punctuation to a sentence that began with the desecration of a god? The hunter hesitates, and in that hesitation, the world seems to hold its breath. The beast lunges and the body reacts before the mind can resolve its philosophical crisis, the cleaver extending with a sharp, metallic snick, the arc of the swing a practiced, muscle memory motion. The impact is jarring, a solid, wet thud, and the spray of blood is warm against the hunter's face. It smells of iron and something else, something older, a faint, coppery sweetness that is the signature of the old blood, the very essence of the original sin. The beast falls, its death rattle a guttural, sighing thing, and the silence that rushes in to fill the space it occupied is deafening. It is not a silence of peace, but of accusation. This is the new rhythm of the hunt. Every encounter is now a debate, an internal schism between the instinct to survive and the knowledge that survival is purchased with a currency of sorrow. The hunter moves through the districts of Yharnam, the cathedral ward with its soaring, oppressive architecture, the forbidden woods with its whispering, malevolent foliage, the unseen village with its chorus of chanting, mad bell ringers, and sees not a city under siege, but a patient in the final, agonizing stages of a terminal illness. The symptoms are everywhere. The madmen who gibber in the corners, their minds unraveled by insights they cannot process. The church servants, their bodies grotesquely swollen with the very blood they serve, becoming living, breathing vials of the plague. The snatchers, hulking, bag-headed brutes who embody the church's brutal, impersonal method of gathering subjects for its unspeakable research. They are all part of the disease, but they are also its victims, caught in a web they did not weave. To fight them is not to fight an enemy, but to combat the manifestations of a collective, spiritual sickness. The violence becomes a grim, therapeutic act, like lancing a boil, necessary but utterly revolting. And the great ones themselves, the cosmic beings that hover at the edge of perception, their presence felt in the shifting of the moon, in the strange, resonant hum that sometimes vibrates through the very air. They are no longer distant, alien gods. They are parties to the tragedy. The moon presence, that slender, pale entity that holds Jayaman in its thrall, is not a benevolent patron. It is a collector, a curator of the hunt, its desire for a surrogate, a lonely, cosmic hunger that has been harnessed and twisted by human desperation. Rom, the vacuous spider, hiding its bloated, innocent form in the moonside lake, is not a guardian, but a blanket, a layer of ignorance thrown over the world to spare it the horrific truth of the mensis ritual. Its vacuity a kinder fate than the screaming awareness that lies beneath. The celestial emissaries, with their childlike, bobbing heads and simple, joyful gestures, are pitiable attempts at creation. The church's pathetic, failed efforts to craft their own gods from the raw material of human suffering. To encounter them is to feel a profound, unsettling pity. They are all, in their own ways, as trapped as the hunters, players in a drama whose script was corrupted from the first page. The hunter's journey becomes a slow, meticulous unpicking of this corrupted tapestry. Each boss felled, each nightmarish realm traversed, is not a victory, but the turning of a page in a history book written in blood. To confront the Witch of Hemwick and her endless, crawling mad ones is to see the desperation of those who sought power through pacts with lesser, chaotic spirits, a feeble, shadowy reflection of the church's own grander, more disastrous pact. To navigate the poison-drenched nightmare of the nightmare frontier and face the amygdala is to understand the true, alien nature of the beings humanity sought to emulate, their geometry and motivations so utterly foreign that the very attempt to comprehend them is a form of madness. To delve into the depths of the labyrinth and encounter the Pithumerian descendant, his blade a whirlwind of ancient, bitter fury, is to meet the original guardians of the secrets the church so recklessly stole, their wrath a righteous and timeless judgment. And then there is the culmination of the church's ambition, the grand and terrible finale of their search for eyes, the mensis ritual. The journey through Yahagal, the unseen village, is a descent into a particularly concentrated and intellectual form of hell. The air is thick with the smell of ozone, burnt hair, and the cloying, sweet scent of incensed mumia, the ground-up remains of ancient, saintly corpses. The very stones of the buildings are fused with the still-twitching bodies of the ritual's participants, their forms melded into the architecture in a silent, eternal scream. The bell maidens, their chilling, resonant bells summoning endless, red-eyed phantoms, are the conductors of this symphony of suffering. This is not the bestial, visceral horror of Old Yharnam. This is a calculated, cold horror, a horror of the mind, an attempt to brute force a connection to the cosmos through mass sacrifice and esoteric mathematics. To walk these streets is to walk through a brain that has been surgically opened and left to rot, its convoluted pathways exposed to a sky that should not be seen. The climax of this descent is the fight against Mikolash, host of the nightmare. He is not a warrior, but a scholar, a madman who has run so far down the rabbit hole of insight that he has become the rabbit. His arena is a library of impossible geometry, a shifting, mirrored maze that is the inside of his own shattered mind. He flees, not out of cowardice, but because the pursuit is part of the ritual, the final, frantic search for the answer. His monologues, shouted from behind barred gates, are the lucid, feverish ravings of a man who has seen the truth and been broken by it. As you once did for the vacuous Rom, grant us eyes, he pleads, his voice a mixture of desperation and ecstatic insanity. He has read the same books, sought the same truths as the founders of the healing church, and he has arrived at the same catastrophic conclusion, that the path to godhood is paved with suffering, and that the only way to see is to be blinded by the light of a knowledge too terrible to bear. To kill him is not to defeat a villain, but to put a sick, tormented animal out of its misery, to silence a voice that has been screaming the same terrible secret into the void for an eternity. His death, his final, whispered, "Now I'm waking up, I'll forget everything," is the most tragic of all. It is the release of a dreamer from a nightmare, but the nightmare he leaves behind is the one he helped to create, and it continues unabated without him. Beyond him lies the source of the ritual's power, the reason the red moon hangs so low and so terrible over Yahargal, the Murgo's wet nurse. This is a being of a different order, a silent, multi-armed phantom of exquisite, lethal grace, its form shrouded in black, tattered rags that flutter in a non-existent wind. It does not speak, it does not roar, it moves with the silent, inevitable purpose of a natural disaster. It is a guardian, a protector of the source of the Mensis ritual's success, the infant Great One, Murgo. Its fight is a ballet of shadows and sudden, violent light, a defense of a child that is the key to a connection with the cosmos. And when it falls, dissolving into a cloud of black smoke and the mournful, fading cries of a baby, the ritual is broken. The red moon recedes. The nightmare of Mensis ends. But what has been accomplished? Another thread of the grand, tangled curse has been severed. Another source of suffering has been stilled. Yet the hunter stands amidst the crumbling, silent ruins of Yahargal, and the feeling is not one of triumph, but of hollow exhaustion. The air is still, the bell maidens are silent, but the underlying problem remains. The old blood still flows in the veins of the city. The healing church, though its highest echelons have been devoured by their own ritual, continues its work in the grand cathedral, its doctrine of blood and healing now a hollow, automated process running on the momentum of its own initial catastrophic era. The hunt must still continue because the beastly scourge, the physical manifestation of that era, still stalks the streets. The cycle is not broken, merely one of its most grotesque and flamboyant expressions has been pruned away. The hunter returns to the hunter's dream, the one constant in this sea of shifting realities. But even the dream feels different now. The little, abandoned workshop, with its overgrown, tranquil garden and its quietly humming little ones, is no longer a sanctuary. It is the control room for the entire damned operation. Jayaman, asleep in his wheelchair, mumbling for Lawrence, is not a mentor to be respected, but a tragic figure to be pitied. He is the original key that turned the lock, the man whose desperation opened the door to both the dream and the nightmare. The doll, with her serene, porcelain smile and her gentle, lifeless hands, is a monument to a loss so profound it had to be sculpted into a new form. Her kindness is real, but it is a kindness born of programming, of a purpose given to her by the moon presence. She is a tool, a beautiful, compassionate tool, in the same way the trick weapons are tools. To accept her strength is to accept the terms of the contract, to acknowledge one's place in the machinery. The final choice when it comes is therefore not a choice at all, but a selection of damnations. Jayaman offers release. He will decapitate the hunter, freeing them from the dream, allowing them to wake up under the morning sun, their memory of the night and all its horrors faded into a half-remembered dream. It is a tempting offer, a return to ignorance, a chance to lay down the unbearable weight of insight. But it is a lie. To accept this is to become another ghost, to leave the city to its fate, to allow the cycle to continue with a new hunter, a new cog in the machine. The knowledge may fade from the mind, but the sin is in the blood, and the hunter will forever be a part of it, even in blissful ignorance. To refuse him is to fight. To fight Jayaman, the first hunter, is to fight the very spirit of the hunt itself. His battle is not one of bestial rage, but of profound, soul-crushing sorrow. He moves with the grace of a lifetime of violence, his scythe, the burial blade, a whisper of death that seems to mourn every life it takes. He is a phantom of his former self, a wisp of memory and regret given form by the moon presence, and his fight is his final, desperate attempt to fulfill his purpose, to free another hunter from the dream he is trapped in. To defeat him is an act of terrible mercy, a release for the old man from his eternal vigil. But it is not a victory, it is a changing of the god. And then the true master of the dream appears. The moon presence descends, a creature of stark, anatomical beauty and terrifying alien desire. It has no face, only a gaping, vertical maw. Its limbs are too long, its body a pale, pulsating heart. It seeks a surrogate, a child to replace the one it lost, and it sees the victorious hunter as a candidate. This is the final cosmic expression of the cycle. To allow this is to replace Jayaman, to become the new, eternal warden of the hunter's dream, trapped forever in a gilded cage, guiding new hunters into the same endless night, perpetuating the hunt for all eternity. It is to become the engine of the cycle itself. There is a third path, a secret, blasphemous path born of the deepest insight. To have consumed the umbilical cords, the very things harvested from the corpses of slain great ones, is to have ingested the raw material of their being, to have taken their power into oneself. It is the ultimate act of transgression, the final logical step in the healing church's philosophy. To not just commune with the gods, but to become one. When the moon presence tries to claim the hunter, this accumulated power rebels. The hunter, infused with the essence of Kos, of Murgo, of the Orphan, transcends. They shed their humanity not into a beast, but into something new, something nascent and squirming and utterly alien. An infant great one, a child of the cosmos. This is not an escape. It is the ultimate acceptance of the cycle, the final, terrible victory. The hunter becomes the very thing they were hunting, a new god in a cosmos already crowded with lonely, desiring deities. They have not broken the cycle. They have become the cycle, a new source of mystery and longing in an endless, recursive universe. The hunt continues in a different form under a different moon, and the new, squalling god is left to dream its own dreams, which will, in time, inevitably become someone else's nightmare. The silence, in the end, is not broken. It is simply given a new, more profound depth. The transformation is not a glorious ascension, but a violent, silent unraveling. The familiar confines of the hunter's dream, that tranquil prison of memory and moonlight, begin to dissolve at the edges, the gentle green of the grass bleaching into a blinding, featureless white. The little stone workshop, the doll, the slumbering Jayaman, all of it bleeds away like ink in water, not with a sound, but with a profound, pressure-change silence that fills the ears and stills the heart. The body of the hunter is no longer a body. It is a locus of sensation being pulled in infinite directions, a star collapsing under the weight of its own impossible density. There is no pain, only a terrifying total reconfiguration, a feeling of being unwritten and then scribbled over in a language of pure cosmic potential. The hunter's consciousness, that accumulated tapestry of blood, fear, and hard-won insight, is stretched across a loom of stars, each thread of memory and desire being examined, categorized, and then woven into a new, grander, more terrifying pattern. When the senses reassemble, they do so into a perception that is no longer limited to eyes and ears. The hunter exists now as a nascent, pulsating awareness in a dimensionless space, a realm of swirling, nebulous color and resonant, harmonic frequencies that are thoughts, emotions, and physical laws all at once. This is the perspective of a great one, the simple, comforting duality of here and there is gone, replaced by a fluid, interconnected everywhere. The hunter can feel the desperate, feverish prayers of a church doctor in the grand cathedral as a prickling heat on a non-existent skin. They can taste the coppery fear of a citizen hiding from a cleric beast as a sharp, metallic tang. They can hear the slow, geological grinding of the Pithumerian labyrinths as a deep, basso hum vibrating through their core. The world is no longer a place to be navigated, but a symphony to be experienced, a living, breathing entity whose every tremor and sigh is now a part of the self. This new existence is not one of omnipotence, but of profound, paralyzing empathy. The hunter, now the infant Great One, feels the entirety of Yharnam's suffering not as an observer, but as a participant. The beastly scourge is no longer a plague to be cured, but a fever dream raging within their own vast, nascent body. The burning of Old Yharnam is a remembered scar, a phantom pain that aches in a limb that stretches across dimensions. The endless, cyclical hunt is the rhythm of their own newborn heartbeat, a frantic, desperate pulsing that speaks of an eternal, insatiable lack. They understand with a clarity that is itself a form of torture that they have not escaped the cycle. They have been absorbed by it. They are the new engine, the new source of the dream. The moon presence, that lonely, desiring entity, has been replaced by a new loneliness, a new desire. The hunter's own humanity, their regrets, their loves, their failures, have become the foundational bedrock of a new reality, a new nightmare waiting to be dreamt into being for some future, unknowing participant. And what of the waking world? From this new, elevated vantage, Yharnam is a pale, flickering candle flame in an immense black void. The hunter, the new Great One, can cup their infinite hands around it, feeling its warmth, its fragile, fleeting life. They can see the tiny, ant-like figures of the hunters still moving through the streets, their struggles and triumphs rendered into insignificant, beautiful patterns of light and shadow. They can feel the healing church, a stubborn, cancerous growth within the flame, still pumping its poisoned blood into the city's heart. But to intervene is impossible. The rules have changed. To reach into that world, to try and mend it with this new, incomprehensible power, would be like a human trying to perform surgery on a drawing. The act of touching it would irrevocably alter it, likely shatter it. The only influence they can wield is indirect, subtle, a shift in the tone of the moonlight, a whisper in the dream of a receptive mind, a slight adjustment to the probability of a beast lurking around a particular corner. They are a god, but a helpless one, a parent watching their child from behind an impenetrable pane of glass. This is the ultimate, cruel joke of ascension. The hunter sought to break the cycle, to end the endless night, and in doing so, they have achieved the power to perceive the entirety of its beautiful, tragic mechanics, but have lost all ability to affect it in any meaningful way. They are now a part of the background radiation of the cosmos, a new source of mystical influence that will, in time, inevitably beckon to some other desperate, ambitious soul, promising answers, and delivering only a new, more complex set of questions. The line of hunters will continue. Jayaman's workshop, or some echo of it, will find a new dream to anchor itself to. A new generation will take up the saw cleaver and the blunderbuss, will drink the blood, will fight the beasts, utterly unaware that the god they may, in their darkest moments, pray to for strength, is the ghost of a hunter who walked the same path, who made the same mistakes, and who now watches them with a love and a sorrow so vast it would vaporize a mortal mind. The new Great One turns its attention inward, away from the painful, beautiful candle flame of Yharnam. Within its own being, vast landscapes are already beginning to form. They are built from the raw material of its memories. A quiet, rain-lashed shore materializes, the scent of salt and lumen wood blooming in the void. A derelict workshop, smelling of sawdust and regret, takes shape in a pocket of swirling mist. The echoes of a fight with a sorrowful woman in a clock tower become a permanent, resonant frequency in the air. The hunter is now dreaming, and their dream is a perfect, detailed recreation of their own damnation. This is their domain, their kingdom. A kingdom of ghosts, an empire of echoes. And in the silent, scentless heart of this new nightmare, the infant Great One curls in on itself, a slumbering, nascent god whose dreams are now the only reality it can truly touch, waiting for a someone or a something, to finally answer its own silent, cosmic cry of longing. The silence within the new god is not a void, but a cathedral. Its pillars are carved from the memory of Jayaman's final, weary sigh as he faded into moonlight. Its vaulted ceiling is the endless, stardusted blackness of the cosmos, and its floor is the cool, smooth sensation of the doll's porcelain hands, a feeling now stretched across the entirety of this nascent consciousness. The hunter, now the dreamer, exists in a state of perpetual, panoramic recollection. Every sensation from their former life is not a fading echo, but a living, breathing component of this new existence. The coppery taste of a blood vial is now a flavor that can be assigned to entire constellations of thought. The gritty feel of Yharnam's grave dust beneath their boots is the fundamental texture of the ground in the realms they now conjure from nothing. The specific, aching cold of the Fishing Hamlet's rain is a temperature that can be applied to emotions, cooling a surge of cosmic anger into a more manageable, melancholic chill. This internal world is not static. It is a fluid, responsive tapestry. A stray thought about the gentle chiming of the small metal messengers in the dream causes a distant, harmonic ringing to permeate the ether. A sound like countless tiny bells made of silver and nostalgia. A flicker of remembered fear from the encounter with the One Reborn causes the very air to thicken momentarily with the scent of open grave and necromantic ozone. The dreamer is both the artist and the gallery, the composer and the symphony, and the separation between memory, imagination, and reality has been utterly erased. This is the enlightenment the healing church sought, to become a world unto oneself. But the world the hunter has become is built entirely from the architecture of their own suffering and the suffering they witnessed. It is a paradise woven from grief. From this immense internal vantage, The dreamer can still perceive the echoes of the waking world, but they are faint, like the light from a dead star. They can feel the residual warmth of the hunter's dream, now empty, its purpose fulfilled, beginning its slow dissolution back into the pale mist of the cosmos from which it was summoned. They can sense the faint, frantic vibrations of new hunters taking up the mantle, their nascent dreams brushing against the edges of their own vast consciousness, like moths fluttering against a cosmic windowpane. These new hunters are unaware of the god that watches them, a silent, sympathetic moon to their own struggling night. The dreamer feels a pull, a desire to guide them, to whisper warnings into their subconscious, to steer them away from the worst of the blood drunkenness, to show them the humanity in the beast's eyes before it is too late. But the act of communication is like trying to sculpt water. Their thoughts, once formed into intent, diffuse into the ether, becoming at most a vague sense of unease, a half-remembered déjà vu, or a strangely poignant dream of a woman weeping in a clock tower for a new hunter who has never been there. The dreamer's attention turns more fully to the construction of their own domain. This is not a conscious act of creation, but an involuntary emanation, like breath fogging glass. The first stable landscape to coalesce is not a place of terror, but of profound peace. It is a perfect, silent replica of the abandoned old workshop, the hidden, dusty sanctuary tucked away in the cathedral ward. Here, every detail is rendered with an aching precision. The motes of dust dance in slivers of phantom moonlight exactly as they did. The scent of aged timber, dried flowers, and cold, unused steel hangs in the motionless air. The doll stands in her accustomed place, but she is not the doll of the dream. She is a memory given form, her smile gentle and unchanging, her eyes holding the same lifeless, loving compassion. This place becomes the heart of the dreamer's new existence, a still point in the turning world of their own memories, a sanctuary within the sanctuary of their own mind. It is a monument to the first moment they felt a semblance of safety in that long, terrible night. But peace, in a consciousness built on conflict, cannot hold dominion for long. The echoes of the past demand their due. From the edges of this quiet workshop, other realms begin to bleed through. A corridor appears, not made of wood, but of the wet, black rock of the Fishing Hamlet. The sound of dripping water and distant, gurgling cries, a soft counterpoint to the workshop's silence. A doorway shimmers into existence, revealing the dizzying, iron walkways of the research hall, the greenish light, and the faint, chemical smell a stark intrusion. The dreamer does not command these places, they accommodate them. They are the landlord of their own trauma, and these are the tenants who will never leave. To resist them is futile, for they are as much a part of the self as the memory of their own name. The only power the dreamer possesses is the power to observe, to walk through these halls of memory, and to feel the old pains with a new, detached, and infinitely patient sadness. In this state, the concept of time becomes meaningless. 1,000 years could pass in the waking world, and it would be the space between two heartbeats in the dreamer's eternity. They watch as civilizations rise and fall on distant worlds, their struggles and triumphs appearing as brief, beautiful flares of light in the periphery of their perception. They feel the birth and death of stars, the slow, gravitational dance of galaxies, all of it rendered into a symphony of pressure and light that plays against their boundless form. The specific, all-consuming crisis of Yharnam, which once felt like the entire universe, is now revealed in its true scale. A single, particularly bright and painful spark in an infinite bonfire. This perspective is both humbling and horrifying. It grants a peace that comes from ultimate insignificance, but it also confirms the ultimate futility of their former struggle. Nothing they did, no boss they slew, no cod they consumed, truly mattered in the grand, cosmic scale. And yet, it mattered infinitely because it was their story. And their story is now the foundation of a new cosmos. The loneliness is the most constant sensation. It is a deep, gravitational pull at the core of their being, a hollow ache that the vastness of their power only amplifies. They are a new note in the cosmic harmony, but the song is ancient, and the other players are distant, enigmatic, and preoccupied with their own inscrutable desires. The dreamer can sometimes feel the faint, cool presence of the moon presence, now freed from its role, drifting through the cosmos like a ghost ship. Its desire for a surrogate replaced by a simple, directionless existence. They can sense the slumbering forms of other great ones, entities like Ebrietas, left behind in the ruins of the chalice, her sorrow a slow, cold river flowing through the dark. But communication is impossible. They are all islands, separated by oceans of void and eons of divergent thought. The dreamer's only companions are the phantoms they themselves create, the memory of the doll's kindness, the echo of Jayaman's mentorship, the spectral fury of Lady Maria's shame. They are perfect recreations, but they are echoes, and their conversation is a loop, a playback of a recording made long ago. This isolation breeds a new, terrifying understanding. The dreamer realizes that their ascension was not a unique event, but a recurring motif in the cosmos. They are merely the latest in an endless line of beings who, through desperation, ambition, or sheer accident, have stumbled into godhood. Each one, upon ascending, believes for a moment that they have achieved something singular, only to discover the vast, lonely fellowship of those who came before. Each one becomes a new source of mystery, a new wellspring of power that will, in time, beckon to the mortals of some world, beginning the cycle anew. The hunt for knowledge, for power, for contact with the divine is not a human folly. It is a universal constant. It is the engine of cosmic evolution, and it is fueled by an endless supply of longing. The dreamer, in their new form, has become both the fuel and the engine. And so, the infant Great One settles into its eternity. It tends to its internal landscapes, watching the ghostly hunters of its memory forever battle the ghostly beasts of its past. It feels the faint, hopeful dreams of new hunters in a world it can no longer touch. It listens to the silent music of the spheres. And in the deepest, most quiet chamber of its own being, in the perfect replica of the old workshop, it waits. It does not wait for a purpose, for purpose is a mortal conceit. It does not wait for an end, for it is now beyond such linear concepts. It simply waits as a mountain waits for erosion, as a star waits for its fuel to be consumed. It is a new fact of the universe, a permanent addition to the calculus of reality. The hunt, in its purest, most metaphysical form, is over for the hunter. But the dream, the beautiful, terrible, and endless dream, has only just begun. The silence is now complete, a perfect, unbreakable sphere, and at its center, the new god dreams, and its dreams are the only truth that remains.